Hello and welcome to COP 4708 Applied Database. In previous sessions, we introduced data and databases or database management systems. We also had some fun playing with Excel and Microsoft Access, explaining the need for a database management system. A system that can manage the extreme amounts of data that we are dealing with on daily basis. Now we have lots of questions. How do you manage the data? How do you create tables, views, and reports? How do you program in SQL or SQL? But stop. First, we have to rewind. Then before we start creating the tables, programming in SQL, and managing data, we need to understand what's called a relational model. The relational model describes a data that is represented by records which are recognized and grouped into relations. It was a concept that was introduced by IBM engineer Code since 1970, and it's used as the standard model for commercial database management systems products. So to start building the relation, let's look at the banking system as an example. So we have the bank, and we are zooming out to the bank. Oh, not that far. Okay. Now, what do we need to track in a banking system? For sure, we need to track two important things: customers and transactions. So this is what we call entity. Entity is some identifiable thing that users want to track in the system, such as customers, computers, sales, orders, transaction, so on. Now, once we identify the entity, we start looking at how can we collect data related to that entity. Data related to the entities are called attributes. And attribute is a property that describes an entity, such as name, street address, ID, email, so on. You can add as much as you want attributes that describes that entity. It's also called field or column. The attribute is also called field or column. Attributes that relates to specific entity will be arranged in what's called a tuple. And a tuple is a single row in a relational database. It's also called a record or instance. The data that we collected about the different entities will be stored in records or tuples, and the tuples will be grouped in special type of a table that is called relation. A relation is a two-dimensional table that has the following characteristics. Rows contain data about an entity. Columns contain data about attributes of the same entity. If we look at the fields or columns, you will see that under name, we have all names. Under street address, we have all street addresses. You cannot put the name of a person under the street address. All entries in a column are of the same kind. Each column has a unique name, and we cannot repeat the same column again. If we have a column that's called street address, we don't need to add another one that's called street address. It's only one column. That's why it has unique name. Cells of the table hold a single value. Inside that cell that says city, we have only one city, Daytona Beach. We don't have more than one city in that cell. The order of the columns is unimportant. Whether you put the street address at the end and the email before, or the email at the end, it doesn't matter. The order of the rows is unimportant. Some cases might be important to arrange the rows in a certain way, maybe alphabetical, but most of the time is not important. The most important thing is to get to that row or that record. It's very important not to have two rows that are identical. That's why we have different rows or records. This is an example of a relation with values of varying length. In this case, in the comments, I had to add comments that is different for different people or for different entities. That's why we have varying length in this case. But this is acceptable. So this is considered a relation with varying length values. While in this one, we have multiple values in a cell, multiple values in the same cell, and that is not acceptable. That's why this is not considered a relation. It's a table, but it's not a relation. And that's why we had to distinguish and create what's called a relational model. So the relational model actually emphasizes the fact that you have to have a unique value or a single value in every cell, and you cannot have multiple values in one cell. Even if you would like to arrange it differently and add fax, home, first they are listed under the email attribute, and that's not correct. So what you did, you had the fax and the home under the email attribute. Second, if you'd like to rearrange the data, like sort by, this will be mixed and it will go to different areas, and then you will lose the link of this number to this record. That's why this is not acceptable as a relation. So there are certain rules for the relation, and that's why they call it a relational database model or relational model, and that's why we identified the different things that we are intending to follow, such as entities, attributes, and tuples or records within the relation. As an example of that, you can just imagine if you go to a restaurant, what will be the entities that will be tracked in the system, and what's important for me to take as attributes or as data items, data points that need to be recorded. The same for the patient. If a patient goes to a clinic or a patient goes to a hospital, what will be the information, and what will be the in the hospital, what will be the entity that need to be tracked. All these are examples of data points or entities or attributes that we are dealing with every day in our life, and that will show us an example of relational database. That will be all for this session, and this session we learned about the relational database, and we'll continue in the next session with more and more about this relational database. So that will be all. If you have any questions, you can email it to me through Florida Online, and that's it. Thank you and have a great day.